This year, the shortfall is much smaller. A recent report from the Independent Fiscal Office has spending coming in around $250 million over projected revenue, though a number of factors, including tax refunds, could shift that. IFO Director Matthew Niddle says it's a great outlook, though he does offer one note of caution.
The main cause for concern would be just that the fact that it's been so long since the last recession, and what happens if we hit one that has been almost 10 years now.
The shortfall this year is mainly due to lawmakers trying to take money from the Joint Underwriting Association, a state-created insurer that sued, claiming the state has no right to its funds. Katie Meyer in Harrisburg. Starbucks says the settlement it reached with the two black men arrested at one of its Philadelphia shops last month includes an offer of a free college education. Starbucks and the men, Rashawn Nelson and Dante Robinson, said yesterday the full terms of the financial settlement will remain confidential. Meanwhile, the city of Philadelphia is giving the two a symbolic $1. The two men also asked the city to set aside $200,000 for a pilot program aimed at high school students hoping to become entrepreneurs. Sports. Phils snapped a 4-game losing skid, 6-0 win last night over the Marlins. Phils are off today. And the Sixers play the Celtics tonight. This is WHY Live.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Rachel Martin in Washington, D.C.
Culver City, California. Keeping track of President Trump's legal team can feel like a full-time job. The latest Ty Cobb is out, Emmett Flood is in, and then there's the relatively recent addition of Rudy Giuliani. He went on Fox News last night to defend the president. He ended up seeming to contradict the president's previous public statements about a hush payment to the adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Giuliani said on TV that Trump reimbursed his lawyer for that hush money after Trump had said he knew nothing about the payment. Now, the president has been tweeting this morning saying the money sent to Daniels was taken from the larger retainer paid to his lawyer. I want to bring in someone who has experience dealing with legal questions surrounding a sitting president. Paul Rosenzweig was senior counsel to Kenneth Starr when Starr was leading the Whitewater investigation into the Clintons. Mr. Rosenzweig, thanks for coming on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
I want to ask you about the latest shakeup in a second, but let me start with Rudy Giuliani on Fox last night. Do you see a strategy here that's being orchestrated, or was this a flub up by the president's lawyer really seeming to contradict his own client?
Well, I think the strategy has to be disclosure of the truth, which is to say that everyone suspected that Michael Cohen was not paying off Stormy Daniels out of his personal funds without a promise of reimbursement. And so this has to be a disclosure that was in some sense inevitable, the why and wherefore of exactly how it is he came to have the money reimbursed to him.
Is it possible that the president was being truthful when he said that he did not know about this payment? Is it possible that he gave a retainer to his lawyer, Michael Cohen, and Cohen made this payment to Stormy Daniels without the president's direct knowledge?
That is, I guess, conceivable, but it would be highly unusual. Most people, when they pay retainers to attorneys, require an accounting of how that money is spent. I work on retainer all the time, and on a monthly circumstance, I send a bill back to the client with how much I've spent, or how much time, what expenses I've incurred, etc., for his information. It's also part of a lawyer's obligation to generally keep a client advised of all significant material things that are happening. And from my perspective, I surely would have thought that settling a claim with a porn star to keep her quiet during a campaign would be one of those large material items that you would advise your client you'd done for him.
So wouldn't Giuliani know that this would at the very least appear like it could be stretching the truth? I mean, why would he go on television and say this?
Well, I assume that this is part of a bit of a change of strategy to try and litigate facts like this in the public rather than save them for behind closed doors with the special counsel or in this case the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York who's investigating it. As to the exact timing of it, you'd have to ask Mr. Giuliani. I don't know.
Well, we'd be happy to have him come on whenever he's willing. Let me get to the shakeup now. We have a new player in the game, a new lawyer, Emmett Flood. Turns out he was part of President Clinton's defense team during Clinton's impeachment proceedings. Ironic that President Trump would hire a lawyer who defended President Clinton, or is that how these things work?
Well, not terribly ironic. The bar that has participated in impeachment proceedings in the past is actually very small. It's limited to anybody who represented President Clinton during the 1990s, or maybe a lawyer who worked for the House of Representatives in prosecuting the impeachment in the Senate. So there aren't a lot of people with very close cognate experience, and frankly, Mr. Flood is an excellent attorney. One of the things that's interesting is that his hiring, if it goes forward, puts a stake in the story that Trump can't get good lawyers, because at least in this instance, he got a very good one.
Do you see the strategy changing with Emmett Flood on board?
Well, I think that it's probably likely that there'll be less overt cooperation, but no defense lawyer worth his salt purposely antagonizes the prosecutor. No defense lawyer worth his salt settles on a strategy that is all slash and burn, at least not until all other options have been taken off the table. I think Mr. Flood is well equipped to engage in that sort of strategy. His firm, Williams & Connolly, is well known for being very zealous in the representation of their clients. But I would say that this is more of changing a bit of the harmony. It's not a change in the baseline, if you will.
Okay. Well, let me just finish by asking you about this list of questions that the New York Times reported. 49 questions that Robert Mueller, the special counsel, wants to ask the president. What do you make of that, and what does it tell us about where Robert Mueller's going?
Well, first, it's not 49 questions, really. It's 49 areas of inquiry. Each of those questions has about a dozen to 2 dozen questions backed up behind it. So it's really
a lot of questions.
An extensive list. I would sort this kind of into 2 buckets. There's a bucket of those questions that clearly indicates that Mueller is focused quite like a laser on the idea of obstruction of justice and trying to understand what was in the president's mind when he contemplated firing Comey, and indeed what he was thinking of when he critiqued the Attorney General for recusal from this matter. So that's a very prominent focus. The other one, quite obviously, is the number of questions that are related to contacts between the Trump campaign and people from Russia, whether they're government officials, intelligence officials, or just people who were putting money in the pocket of some of the people who eventually went to work for the Trump campaign. It's clear from the numerosity of these questions that, at least on the second of these, Mueller's inquiry is very wide-ranging, from a Ukrainian peace plan to a change in the Ukrainian portion of the Republican.
That gives you a sense of the scope. Sadly, we'll have to stop there. We're out of time. Paul Rosenzweig, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The Trump administration says there is an immigration crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. So, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is ordering 35 prosecutors and 18 immigration judges down to the area to help manage it. Sessions also says the move is meant to send a message to the world. Don't come to the U.S. illegally.
We are not going to let this country be overwhelmed. People are not going to caravan or otherwise stampede our border.
At the border in Tijuana, Mexico, NPR's Kirk Sigler reports dozens of asylum seekers from that caravan are still waiting to be processed.
That caravan of Central American asylum seekers Attorney General Sessions was referring to arrived at the border crossing in Tijuana last week. And by now, dozens have passed into the U.S. and are being processed by immigration officials. But there's still a sizable group here under tarps and rough shelters, not unlike a refugee camp. And there are now people from both sides of the border pouring in to donate food, clothing, and other supplies. I'm looking at a group of volunteers over here that are giving out badly needed jackets and other blankets. And there's some women to my right here that are distributing diapers. In this camp, there's not really much time to pause and consider the latest edict from the Trump administration. But volunteers like Ashley Hatfield tell me they're saddened by the tone from north of the border.
They don't understand that where these people come from.
Hatfield, who lives in Tijuana, is helping sort through bags of donated clothes.
They don't want them in their country, but they don't realize what refugees and immigrants have the capability to bring and contribute.
People here say the real crisis along the southwest border is the fact that refugees are fleeing violence in countries like El Salvador and Honduras. An increase in asylum seekers since last year has added to an already huge backlog in immigration cases in the U.S. Currently, about 350 judges preside over close to 700,000 pending cases. At the University of San Diego's Transborder Institute, Director Ev Mead says the administration's actions won't address that backlog.
What they're trying to do here is remove people more quickly, more expeditiously. In other words, the focus here isn't on adjudicating these claims fairly, it's on preventing people from entering the United States.
But Victor Monjarez, a retired Border Patrol chief at the University of Texas El Paso, says the administration's plan might work, and it could very well deter people from crossing illegally.
It's currently a horrible system all the way around. Not only the people that operate that system, but the people that are going through that system. They're just not very swift.
In Tijuana, Isabel Rodriguez feels like she has no other choice but to try and join that system and its backlog, even though she could be detained or wait months, if not years, for a court date. It's too dangerous to go home to El Salvador, she says. The lawyers working with the caravan have told me I have a good shot at getting asylum, so I'll sit here and wait, she says, as long as it takes. Kirk Ziegler, NPR News, Tijuana.
And don't forget, you can keep up with the latest news throughout the day on npr.org. And this afternoon, make sure to listen to All Things Considered. They'll be following the NRA conference happening in Dallas. You can listen by asking your smart speaker to play NPR, or you can ask it to play your local member station by name. This is NPR News.
This is Morning Edition. It's 7:18. It's WHYY. Some California Republicans are leery of tying themselves too closely to the Trump administration.
They're taking us into a desert that has no water at the end of it, and we're going to die in that desert.
More on the challenges facing GOP candidates in California this election year. We'll get a report coming up at 7:27 from Ben Bradford of Capital Public Radio. News is next from NPR. Intervention Associates supports WHYY. Intervention Associates is a subsidiary of Friends Life Care Partners and provides care management, guardianship, and healthcare power of attorney services. These are fee-based and include assessments, care management, patient advocacy, and long-term care planning. Intervention Associates serves clients of all ages, seniors, those with special needs, physical and/or mental disabilities. Learn more at interventionassociates.org.
From NPR News in Washington, I'm Dave Mattingly. A U.S. delegation is in China today, led by Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. NPR's Anthony Kuhn says the 2 days of talks in Beijing are designed to ease tensions over trade, including China's surplus with the U.S. and President Trump's new tariffs targeting Chinese goods.
Ahead of the talks, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said that the U.S. isn't seeking to change China's economic system. It just wants more market access for U.S. firms. China says its basic policies aren't up for discussion anyway. So many observers find it hard to see how the delegation can address any of the root issues underlying the current trade spat.
Lawmakers in Britain are suggesting the closing of Cambridge Analytica might hinder ongoing investigations into the firm. As NPR's Daniela Cheslow reports from London, authorities are trying to determine if the political consulting firm broke any laws by using the personal information of millions of Facebook users.
Damian Collins, chair of the British Parliamentary Committee looking into data breaches, tweeted that Cambridge Analytica, quote, cannot be allowed to delete their data history by closing. Cambridge Analytica announced Wednesday it had started insolvency proceedings in the UK after what it called a siege of media coverage drove away its customers. The company is accused of buying the data of millions of Facebook users, including British accounts, without their consent.
I'm Dave Mattingly in Washington.
Hey everybody, this is Tanzina Vega, the new host of The Takeaway. I'll be starting on May 7th, and as we dive into the news of the day, we want your help. What do you want to hear about? What stories are flying under the radar that are huge in your world? We want to hear about them. Post on our Facebook page or call us at 877-8MY-TAKE, and get ready for me on The Takeaway starting next week. Weekdays from noon to 1 on WHYY.
Supporting WHYY, Citizens Bank Wealth Management. No matter how you envision retirement, Citizens Bank Wealth Management can create a plan that helps make the retirement you're thinking about the one you can look forward to. Learn more at citizensbank.com/retirement.
7:21, good morning, I'm Jennifer Lynn. Hope you're doing all right in this warm snap. We're going to be in the 90s today, 92 for the high. With partly cloudy skies and maybe a shower or thunderstorm in the afternoon. And this transit note, we've been talking about this morning. It may affect you. Amtrak says service between Philadelphia and Washington has been temporarily suspended. This is due to a freight train derailment in Delaware County that happened overnight. And this is also affecting SEPTA's Wilmington Newark line. It is suspended as well. 67 degrees in Philly, 67 in Sewell, New Jersey. Again, we're soaring up to 92 today at 7:22.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Subaru, committed to doing its part to make the world a better place by supporting philanthropic initiatives in local communities. Learn more at Subaru.com/lovepromise. Love, it's what makes a Subaru a Subaru. From Atlassian, provider of collaboration software for organizations of all sizes. Through products like Jira Software, Confluence, Trello, and Stride, teams can plan, track, and communicate. More at Atlassian.com. And from Optum, committed to tackling the biggest challenges in healthcare with data-driven solutions designed to improve outcomes and make the system better for everyone. Learn more at Optum.com. Optum, how well gets done.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Rachel Martin.
And I'm David Green. California and 17 other states are suing the Environmental Protection Agency. They want to stop a controversial plan to weaken federal auto emission standards. Of course, controversy is just part of EPA's history. The agency was founded in 1970 by President Richard Nixon.
Clean air and clean water, the wise use of our land, the protection of wildlife and natural beauty, parks for all to enjoy. These are part of the birthright of every American.
Nixon then went on to sign the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, regulating environmental cleanup. Challenges to those regulations have caused many of you to raise questions that we're going to put to commentator Cokie Roberts this morning. Hi, Cokie.
Hi, David.
All right, let's get right to this. Our first question goes back to the origins of the EPA. It's from Sarah Fay, and she wants to know, how controversial was its coming into existence, and how broad of support did it have at its founding?
Well, the fact that the president so strongly supported it made a huge difference. But a lot of things had led up to this point, David. There had been horrible environmental disasters. The Cuyahoga River had pushed into...
Yeah.
You couldn't walk down the street in New York without getting soot in your eyes, and you couldn't walk by the Potomac River because it smelled so awful.
Well, with all that happening through the 70s, you had a ton of legislation trying to address all of this. I mean, regulating pesticides and food quality, and the controversy around those gets to our next question.
This is Dave Hellrum from Chicago, and I would like to know how the agency has survived hostile agendas in the past, and what plans, if any, they have to survive the current political environment.
Well, the most difficult time before this one was during the Reagan administration, when Ann Gorsuch, the mother of our most recent Supreme Court Justice, was the EPA director, and she slashed the budget and cut way back on the number of hazardous waste sites that were forced to clean up under the Superfund law. When Congress subpoenaed documents relating to the law, she refused to comply. The House charged her with contempt of Congress. It was high drama. I covered it. It was quite something. That led to her resignation. So a friendly Congress is one way to survive, but mainly it's public pressure. The last Gallup poll on the question, 57% of people said the priority was to protect the environment, even if it curbed economic growth. Now that's down from a high of 71% in 1990, but up from a low of 38% in 2010 during the recession.
The next question we have gets to the question of how to enforce environmental laws, and it comes from Darrell Durrett. The current director claims no legal authority to regulate emissions. That seems at odds with my memory about the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. What is the EPA's legal mandate?
Well, I don't think he claims no legal authority, but he has failed to issue regulations for methane emissions, and that's led to 14 states' attorneys general suing Pruitt for violating the Clean Air Act. He's also rolled back the emission standards for cars set by the Obama administration and says that California cannot set its own higher standards than his. Now, that's odd, David, since many Republicans call for state and local enforcement of the laws rather than federal enforcement. Florida freshman Matt Gaetz introduced a bill in this current Congress to abolish the EPA and leave it all to local government.
Cokie, thanks as always.
Good to talk to you.
Commentator Cokie Roberts, and you can ask Cokie your questions about how politics and government work. Just email us, askcokie@npr.org, or you can tweet us. Just use the hashtag AskCokie.
There's an identity crisis in the California Republican Party. They've been losing ground in recent years, and President Trump is not popular with a lot of Californians. So the question is whether to wave the Make America Great Again hat in the air or to build a different GOP brand. Capitol Public Radio's Ben Bradford reports on how this is playing out in the race for one coveted congressional seat.
The California Republican Party has tied itself to President Trump. There's perhaps no better example than the slew of Republican-led cities and counties joining the Trump administration in a lawsuit against California.
We're sending a clear message to Governor Brown.
Kristen Gaspar chairs the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. She spoke on Fox News after the county voted to oppose California's new sanctuary protections for undocumented immigrants.
Enough is enough. He needs to follow the Constitution. He can't attempt to undermine federal immigration laws.
Gaspar is one of several Republican candidates running to replace retiring Congressman Darrell Issa in northern San Diego County. Most are appealing to committed Republican voters enthused by the Trump campaign's messages. That's what the party did last year at its state convention, with Steve Bannon as the keynote speaker.
Build the wall, right? Protect our southern border.
But some prominent Republicans fear embracing that message from a president whose popularity is hovering around 30% in the state.
They're taking us into a desert that has no water at the end of it, and we're going to die in that desert.
State Assemblyman Rocky Chavez is another candidate for Darrell Issa's seat. Chavez says adopting the president's nationalist rhetoric won't help win back California Latino and Asian voters, who've largely rejected the GOP.
This whole tariff thing and putting up walls, that's crazy.
Chavez joined a group of Republicans last month in Los Angeles to discuss shifting the party's message.
Today we're here because the soul of our great Republican Party that inspired each and every one of us is worth fighting for.
Former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger is the last Republican elected to statewide office. The group calls itself New Way California. They're looking to compromise with Democrats. Take this ad that we've watched.
Climate change is real. California Republicans believe it and are working to address it.
Instead of battling over divisive issues like illegal immigration, New Way leaders want to focus on an economic case, that California's problems are rooted in high state taxes and overregulation. Chavez describes it as the key to winning ICE's 49th congressional district seat.
There's actually going to be a litmus test in the 49 how Republicans can win in a coastal community that was going red to blue. We're going to stop it.
The New Way pitch found traction with Ruben Guerra, who runs the Latin Business Association in Los Angeles. He's a Democrat who voted for Schwarzenegger.
Some of these regulations and some of these laws, even I say, well, come on, guys, really wake up. So I don't care whether it's Republican or Democrat.
But party officials do not want to moderate. Harmeet Dillon represents California on the Republican National Committee.
Becoming Democrat light may be a way for one or two guys to hold their current jobs at $100,000 salaries. It is a recipe for disaster for a party.
Political analysts generally favor Democrats to flip ICE's seat. If Republicans manage to hold on, how they do it could serve as a blueprint for the party going forward. For NPR News, I'm Ben Bradford.
This is Morning Edition. It's WHYY at 7:30. Good morning, I'm Jennifer Lynn. The ACLU is suing SEPTA over its advertising policy, saying that a ban on political ads violates the First Amendment. WHYY's Jim Sachs reports.
If you write SEPTA, you've seen a few ads. A bus wrapped in a Pats advertisement is like a billboard on wheels for greasy 3 a.m. cheesesteak glory. Posters on the subway promote personal injury lawyers. SEPTA gets $16 million a year in marketing revenues. But there are also ads you don't see. The ads SEPTA prohibits under a policy that the ACLU calls unconstitutional. You see, SEPTA is a government entity, and ads are a form of speech. So when SEPTA bans certain ads, it's censoring speech, which the First Amendment usually doesn't allow.
Anytime that the government has vague standards that they use to censor speech, there's a real risk that the government will manipulate those standards to shut down controversial or unpopular speech.
That's Molly Tack Cooper, a lawyer with the Pennsylvania ACLU, who is suing SEPTA on behalf of the Center for Investigative Reporting. That group wanted to run a series of ads highlighting a story on racial disparities in mortgage lending. SEPTA rejected the ad, saying it was political.
SEPTA's whole purpose here seems to be to cut off anything that might be controversial.
That's precisely SEPTA's goal. SEPTA adopted its advertising in 2015.
Also calls from Newark listeners on the mayoral election there. That's coming up this morning, starting at 10 o'clock. Right now, here's John Schaefer with today's Gig Alert.
Back in the 1970s, Todd Rundgren turned his back on pop success after several top 40 hits and began producing big, ambitious, almost orchestral albums like this one called Utopia. He says he was fascinated at the time with prog rock and fusion. Rundgren fans have been waiting for several decades for him to reassemble the band that produced that music, and this year, with prog rock's reputation being somewhat rehabilitated, Rundgren has obliged. Utopia by Todd Rundgren. He performs with the Utopia Band tonight at Town Hall. For details, go to newsounds.org.
Mostly sunny today, slight chance of some showers and thunderstorms later on with a high near 88 degrees with southwesterly breezes around 16 miles per hour. 73 degrees right now in New York. It's 7:33.
Support for NPR comes from member stations and from Performance Bicycle, offering bikes and gear, including electric bicycles, to get everyone riding during National Bike Month. Performance Bicycle, store locations and an online store at performancebike.com. And Log Me In, makers of GoToMeeting, a collaborative meeting platform with over 18 million monthly users, designed to connect people from anywhere in the world on any device. Learn more at gotomeeting.com.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm David Green in Culver City, California.
And I'm Rachel Martin in Washington, D.C. President Trump is weighing in this morning on revelations that he reimbursed his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, for payments that Cohen made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. Trump is responding to an interview that his new lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, gave to Fox News last night. President Trump had previously denied any knowledge of this payment, which Giuliani reveals in this Fox News interview. And the whole thing stemmed from an allegation from Stormy Daniels that she had a sexual encounter with Donald Trump back in 2006. We are joined now by NPR White House reporter Ayesha Roscoe. Ayesha, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So the president chiming in on Twitter, responding to the interview Rudy Giuliani made last night with Sean Hannity on Fox News, saying that the president actually did reimburse Michael Cohen this $130,000. What is President Trump saying about this morning?
Well, President Trump is saying on Twitter that Michael Cohen did receive a monthly retainer, and from this retainer that he was receiving, he was reimbursed for this private contract between two parties, i.e. Stormy Daniels. And so he's saying, but he's stressing that this was not from the campaign. It had nothing to do with the campaign. And so he's saying that these type of agreements are very common for celebrities and people of wealth. And so he is saying that the reimbursement happened, but kind of defending it and saying that this is the way things work for when you have a lot of money and you're rich and you deal with accusations.
Right. He's alleging that he had this fund set up to pay his attorney Michael Cohen to just handle matters like this. But how does this jibe with previous statements by the president, who has maintained all along that he didn't have an affair with Stormy Daniels? He rejects that, but also that he had no notion of any payment that Michael Cohen would have made to Stormy Daniels.
Well, that's what we don't really know, and I don't think that's really been answered yet, because even Rudy Giuliani, he did not say when the president became aware of this payment to Stormy, and he kind of alluded to the idea that maybe the president knew generally about it but didn't know some specifics, and so we don't know. In the past, President Trump said he knew nothing about the payment, and so that's one of the questions that's going to have to be answered now by the administration is when did he get knowledge of this payment?
And the distinction you point out is an important one, that Giuliani has said that this payment, this money, didn't come from campaign funds. That is important because the central legal question here isn't whether this affair happened or even whether or not Donald Trump paid money to keep Stormy Daniels quiet. It's whether or not the money was part of the campaign, right?
Yes, so there is a question of whether this violated campaign finance laws. There are some people who have said that even if it didn't come from the campaign, if it was helping the campaign, an argument could be made that it could constitute a violation if they didn't report it and things of that nature. So there'll still be questions.